Dian Identity, Exploring Writer Identity in Student Academic Writing through the Heirs Person Pronoun P. R.Tang asterisk, Suganthi John. Department of English Language and Literature, National University of Singapore, 10 Kent Ridge Crescent, Singapore, 118,260. Abstract. Academic writing has traditionally been thought of as a convention-bound monolithic entity that involves distant, convoluted, and impersonal prose. However, recent research has suggested a growing recognition that there is room for negotiation of identity within academic writing, and thus academic writing need not be totally devoid of a writer's presence. In this article, we explore the notion of writer identity in academic essays by focusing on heirs person pronouns, arguably the most visible manifestation of a writer's presence in a text. Our main argument is that the heirs person pronoun in academic writing is not a homogeneous entity. Accordingly, we set up a typology of 60 or n identities behind the heirs person pronoun in academic writing. We then apply this framework to a specific examination of the essays of 27 heirs-tier undergraduates at the National University of Singapore. We focus on how the identities of these student writers are revealed through uses of the heirs person pronoun, and reoct on the implications of our results on issues of critical thinking and writing education at the tertiary level. 1989, The American University. Published by Elsevier Science Limited. All rights reserved. 889 4,1906/99/. Students beginning tertiary education may aim themselves in an academic environment which is very different from what they are used to. They are quickly placed in a position where they have to appropriate or be appropriated by specialized discourse. Bartholomew, 1985, p. 135, often before they have learned how to properly utilize the specialized discourse of higher education. With academic writing conventions rarely taught explicitly, a problem noted by several researchers, including Lillies, 1987, Delpit, 1986, many students approach their assignments with a vague notion of academic writing as a monolithic entity involving dry, convoluted, distant, and impersonal prose that must be mastered in order to gain membership into the academic discourse community. See Clark, 1982, for a good introduction to this concept. Recent research. Clark, 1982, Ivanek, 1994, 1995, 1998, Ivanek and Simpson, 1992, Lillies, 1987, however, suggests a growing trend away from the traditional notion of academic writing as distant and impersonal towards a recognition that academic writing need not be totally devoid of the writer's presence. The issue of how writers create identities for themselves in their academic writing thus emerges as a very pertinent area of research. Recognizing that a writer's identity in any text is created by and revealed through a combination of his or her many discoursal choices, we have decided to focus on just one of these aspects of writers' use of heirs person pronouns. 2. Writer roles and writer identity in academic writing. The phrase creating identities implies a whole philosophy of thinking that has become increasingly accessible and accepted through the work of Michael Halliday and others of the Systemic School of Linguistics. Halliday, 1994, 1998, Martin, 1989. In this school of thought, reality is not something that exists independently as an objective entity, but is instead a construct of human creation through language. In other words, language does not merely reoct an existing reality, but actually creates that reality. If we see the notion of self as one of the aspects of reality, we can then extrapolate from the above viewpoint to say that the idea of the self, too, is not ext. Language does not serve merely as a tool to express a self that we already have, but serves as a resource for creating that self. This view is shared by Roland Barthes and William Coles Harris, 1987, and Robert Burke, 1981. If the self is not a pre-language entity, then writers can be sensitized to the possibilities of inventing their selves through their writing. They can, as it were, break free from the real or imagined molds of behavior imposed upon them by their discourse situations to inhabit different chosen roles in their writing. The study of writer identity in academic writing is a relatively unexplored area of research. Cherry, 1988, one of the few researchers who has specifically addressed this issue, distinguishes between ethos and persona in writing with ethos. R.Tang, S. John/English for specific purposes 1999 S23 plus or minus S39 S24, referring to the personal characteristics, e.g. intelligent, funny, responsible, etc. that a reader attributes to a writer based on textual evidence, and persona referring to the roles which a writer adopts while producing a particular piece of writing. As Cherry does not explicitly discuss the range of possible roles a person can hold often simultaneously, we would like to suggest three main levels at which people can hold or perform roles: at the societal level, at the discourse level, and at the genre level. Ivanek, 1988, p. 46 distinguishes between discourse and genre as follows. Any piece of language might be categorized as primarily belonging to a particular genre, for example, poem genre or newspaper editorial genre, and can be shown to have characteristics of a particular discourse, for example, anti-war discourse or natural science discourse. So a single discourse can be found in several different genres. In the same way, a single genre, for example, undergraduate essay genre, also provides the container for a wide variety of discourses, for example, philosophy discourse, natural science discourse. Societal roles are the identities that are, in a sense, inherent to a person, e.g., mother, father, son, daughter, American, Singaporean. Discourse roles are the identities that a person acquires by participation in a particular discourse community, e.g., a lawyer or a client in the legal discourse community, a doctor or a patient in the medical discourse community. Generally, these roles only hold within the confines of that discourse community. For example, a person is not a client outside of the courtroom or the lawyer's OAS. In some cases, however, a person's job might come to demean him or her so well that the society demeans them by it. When this happens, what began as a discourse role might develop into a societal role, as when a prominent medical doctor is identified as such even when he or she is picking up a head of lettuce at the supermarket. Genre roles are specific to a particular genre within the discourse community. For example, in this article, when we speak of the writer as a guide through the essay or the architect of the essay, we are discussing genre roles, identities that are created within the genre of the undergraduate academic essay or academic research article. A genre role will generally not develop into a societal role. One does not identify a person as a guide through the essay in any context outside of academic writing. It is important to note that identities at all three levels can be created linguistically in writing. Taking up Cherry's 1988 challenge for more writing researchers to investigate the phenomenon of self-representation in writing, Ivanek, 1994, 1995, 1988 has developed a well-articulated framework comprising four interrelated aspects of writer identity. Table 1. Ivanek's work is particularly revealing with respect to the discoursal or textual selves of her participants, not to be confused with what we have called discourse roles. In exploring the textual selves of her participants, she focuses on their societal and discourse roles, but not genre roles. Our present study, therefore, addresses genre roles, focusing only on one genre, namely the academic essay. R.Tang, S. John/English for specific purposes 1999 S23 plus or minus S39 S25. 3. Possible identities behind the heirs person pronoun in academic writing. In this section, we look at the various ways in which the heirs person pronoun may be used in academic writing. Most of us are probably aware at some level that not all instances of the authorial I are exactly alike, though few researchers have articulated this explicitly. When we conducted a brief survey of handbooks for college and university writers, we found that while many do address the question of whether the heirs person should be used in writing student essays, few seem to appreciate the fact that the heirs person pronoun in academic writing is not a homogeneous entity, and that there is a range of roles or identities that may be fronted by heirs person pronoun. We took as our starting point a comment made by Ivanek 1998 p. 307. Here is a continuum from not using I at all, through using I with verbs associated with the process of structuring the writing, to using I in association with the research process, and enally to using I with verbs associated with cognitive acts. Ivanek does not expand on her idea of a continuum of I's, nor does she state explicitly the criteria by which she has ordered the heirs person pronouns along this continuum. However, it seems reasonable to suggest, given her past research, see especially Ivanek 1995, that what she had in mind was a Klein showing the degree of power wielded by the authorial presence through a particular instance of use of the heirs person pronoun. Here, therefore, we develop Ivanek's idea of a continuum of I's, heirs, introducing the various roles that we have identified for the heirs person pronouns within academic essays, and next ordering these roles along the continuum in terms of the degree of authorial power. By a powerful authorial presence, we mean that the writer displays a high level of authority within the text, where authority has elements of both its common meanings of a right to control or command others and knowledge or expertise in a particular field, as well as a meaning more specific to this article, the quality belonging to an author, where author is used in Ivanek's 1994 p. 12 very specialized sense of a maker of meaning. Our setting up of the categories involved a preliminary analysis of our 27 student essays and a sampling of published academic articles and books in linguistics to determine the different identities foregrounded by the heirs person. Table 1 Ivanek's 1998 4 aspects of writer identity. Autobiographical self, the identity which people bring with them to any act of writing. Ivanek 1998 p. 24 discoursal self, the image a writer projects in the writing self as author, the self who originates a position or stand in the writing possibilities for selfhood in the sociocultural and institutional context. In any institutional context, there will be several socially available possibilities for selfhood, several ways of doing the same thing. Of these, some will be privileged over others in the sense that the institution accords them more status. Ivanek 1998 p. 27. R.Tang S. John/English for specific purposes 1999 S23 plus or minus S39 S26. Pronouns. It should be noted that we labeled our categories I as the representative, I as the guide, etc. for the sake of uniformity and ease of reference. When we devised our continuum of roles, we considered all the various forms of the heirs person pronoun I, me, my, mine, we, us, our, and ours. 3.1. I as the representative. This is a generic heirs person pronoun, usually realized as the plural we or us, that writers use as a proxy for a larger group of people. For instance, in the sentence it resulted in the English we know today's script 10, we refers to people in general. In a sentence like at least for French, we know that it solely belongs to the Romance language's script 10, however, that we refers to a smaller group, members of the linguistics discourse community perhaps. In the following sentence, the English language that we have today reoaks many centuries of development script 16. It is especially clear that what appears to signal ownership of some universal or common property, in this case English, in reality simply denotes the existence of a particular state of heirs. Thus, a noun phrase like the English language that we have today simply means the English language that exists today. Used this way, the heirs person pronoun, far from giving the reader information about the writer, he actively reduces the writer to a non-entity. Therefore, in terms of the potential power wielded by an authorial presence, this is the least powerful role that the heirs person pronoun confront. 3.2. I as the guide through the essay. The best way to understand this role is to think of the essay as a foreign country, with the writer as the guide during the reader's journey through that unfamiliar territory. With this overriding metaphor of essay equals foreign country in place, we can see the role of guide being the person who shows the reader through the essay, much as a tour director would take a traveler through a foreign country, locates the reader and the writer together in the time and place of the essay, draws the reader's attention to points which are plainly visible or obvious within the essay, usually from examples that are cited within the text itself, and arrives at a conclusion destination that he or she presumes is shared by the reader. This particular role is often signaled explicitly by the use of verbs like see, note, and observe in Halliday's 1994 terms, mental processes of perception, specify equally visual perception, as in the following examples. Let us now look at some examples of JC compared to standard British English SB script 26. Moreover, from example 1, we observe that there is an absence of the determiner article, then pronoun that script 26. R.Tang S. John/English for specific purposes 1999 S23 plus or minus S39 S27. It should be clear from this discussion that since the writer as guide is always implicitly or explicitly accompanied by the reader, this particular usage of the heirs person pronoun is usually realized in the plural, inclusive form of we or us. 3.3. I is the architect of the essay, usually realized as the heirs person singular. This usage of the I foregrounds the person who writes, organizes, structures, and outlines the material in the essay, as in the following example. In this essay, I will discuss the bastard status of English from the pre-English period AD 450 to Middle English c. 1100 plus or minus 1450 script 16. Some might argue that the role of the architect exhibits similarities to that of the guide. We agree that this is so, but we also believe that there is a crucial difference between the two, where the architect has the responsibility of organizing and outlining the material and the writing creating structure, as it were. In the writing process, there is a sense in which the guide merely seems to be showing the reader through an already existing terrain. Given that the former appears to be the more powerful role of the two, we think it best to maintain two separate categories. 3.4. I is the recounter of the research process. The person behind this heirs person pronoun is the one who describes or recounts the various steps of the research process. This work done by the writer prior to the writing might include such things as reading source texts, interviewing subjects, collecting data, and so on. This particular role is often signaled by the pairing of heirs person pronouns with what Halliday 1994 calls material process verbs, i.e. doing verbs like work, read, interview, collect, frequently used in the past tense. A good example would be when Ivanek 1988 p. 118 writes the data I collected included written texts, transcripts of discussions, and notes made as a result of observation. 3.5. I is the opinion holder. The opinion holder is the person who shares an opinion, view, or attitude, for example, by expressing agreement, disagreement, or interest with regard to known information or established facts. While not always signaled by the use of I, this role, when it does involve the use of the heirs person pronoun, often co-occurs with verbs depicting what Halliday 1994 terms mental processes of cognition, as in I think Kashwant Singh has managed to succinctly convey the essence of the English language with his phrase bastard language script 8. R.Tang S. John/English for specific purposes 1999 S23 plus or minus S39 S28. This role, we suggest, is the most powerful role that a writer can create and inhabit within his or her writing. It involves the writer's conception of the ideas or knowledge claims which are advanced in the essay, Crucially, it calls for the writer to present or signal these as new in the essay. It maps largely onto Ivanik's term author, the self that claim authority is the source of the content of the text 1988 p. 26. We like this particular quote from Ivanik as it highlights an important point with respect to this role. What is important is that the writers claim authority and exhibit some form of ownership of the content of their writing, showing that they perceive themselves as people who have the right and the ability to originate new ideas, even if at present time constraints or inexperience might make truly original contributions unlikely. Having described in detail the 6 possible roles we have identity behind the heirs person pronoun, we now order these along a continuum fig. 1. In the next part of our article, we report on our application of this continuum to a specific examination of a sample of undergraduate academic essays. 4. Our study, we collected the essays written by 27 students for R.Tang English Language Module 1102 Studying English in Context. Students were required to complete a 1,000-word essay explaining a given quotation using material taught on the course. The question read, English quite obviously is the richest language in the world today because it has never succumbed to the purists like the French of purists. They are the worst enemies of language. English is a bastard language. That's why it's virile. It's healthy. It's absorbed every language that it has come into contact with. Kashwant Singh, Indian writer and former newspaper editor. Fig. 1. A typology of possible identities behind the heirs person pronoun in academic writing. R.Tang S. John/English for specific purposes 18-1989 S23 plus or minus S39 S29. In a radio program. What does Kashwant Singh mean when he describes the English language as a bastard language? You may focus on any aspect of its bastard status, e.g., just one period of history, or just lexis or grammar, and show this has affected the language. We had 2 central concerns in looking at the essays, 1 to determine if the students use heirs person pronouns in their writing, and 2 to ascertain the roles that are behind these heirs person references. The main endings of our research are highlighted below. Table 2 shows the distribution of the various heirs person pronouns fronting the 6 roles we identified in each of the 27 essays. We found that a fairly large percentage of our students, approximately 81%, do use the heirs person pronoun in their writing, though somewhat sparingly. The average number of heirs person pronouns per script is just 3.41. In terms of actual numbers, there was 1 script with 16 occurrences of the heirs person pronoun, the highest number, and 8 scripts with no instances of heirs person pronoun use at all. 5. Discussion. 5.1. Representative. Out of a total of 92 instances of the heirs person pronoun used across all 27 scripts, 39 fall into this category. This translates into 39% of the total number of occurrences, the highest percentage taken up by a single role. This role, as we have highlighted, is the least powerful role our students inhabit in their writing. Clark, Cotty, Constantinu, and Yo 1990p. 91 write that students are in a position of weakness relative to those who assess their work. It is not surprising then that some students, feeling that they do not have a right to exist in academic writing, adopt a role which carries the least information about themselves as individuals. For example, when a student writes ranges of languages have come together over the centuries to produce now what we call the English language script 12. The we in the sentence says nothing specific about the writer but makes a rather vague reference to people in general. It is possible, however, to see a positive side to this role. When our students inhabit the role as representative, it may be an attempt on their part to signal their desired membership in the linguistics discourse community. This is seen when they display knowledge of the facts and opinions that are generally accepted by other members of this discourse community. Therefore, when a student writes thus, we get an auction of the noun that we have today's script 12, or besides the lexis, hypotaxis in our grammar was also adapted from Latin script 6. These sentences indicate shared knowledge between the writer and the reader, and a presupposition of the writer's acceptance in the linguistics discourse community. As Ivanik 1995 p. 15 points out, hence someone uses a particular discourse. R.Tang S. John/English for specific purposes 18-1989 S23 plus or minus S39 S30. Type, they identify themselves with the interests, values, beliefs, and power relations which are associated with it. She also suggests that students create the impression that they are members of the discourse community because they assume it will bring good grades. Although students' alignment of themselves with established members of the discourse community should be viewed as positive, we suggest that, in comparison to the other roles along our continuum, the representative is not a very demanding role. Unlike the architect who creates structure for the text, the recounter of research who relates steps in the research process, thus recreating the backdrop to the research, and the opinion holder and originator who formulate thoughts and ideas in the writing, creating the content as it were. The table 2 distribution. Representative merely positions himself or herself alongside other creators of meaning rather than doing any actual creation at all. Therefore, although we have a high number of instances of the heirs person pronoun in this category, it does not point to a strong authorial presence. 5.2. Guide. There are 31 instances of the heirs person pronoun used in conjunction with this role. This accounts for 7% of the total, again a fairly high percentage. One striking similarity between this role and the role of the representative is that the role of guide, too, is realized by the plural form of the heirs person. There are 29 instances of we and 2 of us used in conjunction with this role. This tendency of students to signal their presence in their text with a plural person is significant, as it suggests that students may be operating with a safety in numbers mentality and that they are reluctant to assert their individuality in their writing. Another possible reason for students' apparent confidence with this role is that it is, in a sense, an external role. Although written in at the time of composing, the guide seems in some essays to be a rather owning presence, surfacing only at strategic moments in the essay to lead the reader through the text. Further, as a guide, the writer appears to momentarily stand apart from the writing he or she is otherwise creating to view the direction that the text is taking and to show the reader this direction almost as if the text were an entity unrelated to him or her. The guide, thus, is a fairly non-threatening role to inhabit, as it allows students to provide direction in their writing while remaining fairly distant from it. In addition, the writer as guide presupposes the congenial accompaniment of the reader and backgrounds the author of the ideas who might be the subject of attacks from discerning readers. 5.3. Architect. In our student scripts, we found only 13 instances of the heirs person pronoun in the role of the architect. This low occurrence was somewhat disturbing, as the architect's duty is to signpost and provide an overall outline of the essay for the reader, a very important feature in good writing. Returning to the scripts, however, we discovered that students are in fact present as architects of their writing, but do not use the heirs person to realize this role. Instead, students use one or more of 3 other strategies. 1. Passivization, which allows students to remove themselves as the agent of any actions performed, e.g., the action of showing in the example below. The sources of the English lexis will be shown, and in reality, the English language has been acted in an enriching fashion. Script 13. R.Tang S. John/English for specific purposes 18-1989 S23 plus or minus S39 S32. 2. Making an inanimate object, e.g., This essay the agent of the actions performed. This essay looks at the variation and development of English Lexis 1 aspect of its bastard status script 11. 3. Nominalization, whereby an action done by the writers discussed in the example below is turned into an abstract noun which is then portrayed as the agent of another action explained in the example below. A discussion on Lexis can explain the bastard status of the English language script 24. If it is true that the social meanings language carries with it are embodied in lexical and syntactic structures as Fowler et al. 1979, cited in Clark, 1992 p. 121 suggest, then students by making other lexical and syntactic choices instead of using the heirs person pronoun reveal something important about the way in which they perceive themselves at the university and in their writing. Their notion that academic writing is necessarily distant and impersonal may in fact be part of a higher overriding ideologue of knowledge-making. Ivanic, 1988 p. 303. Ivanic 1988 refers to a continuum from a constructivist view to a positivist view of knowledge-making in academia. Table 3 summarizes the differences between these two views. Given that our students seem to objectify knowledge, one goal of writing education then should be to make students aware that there is an alternative to this positivist view of meaning, while still leaving to them the ultimate decision of which view to subscribe to. 5.4. Recounter of the research process. None of our students used heirs person pronouns in conjunction with this role in their essays. This is perhaps not surprising, given the nature of the task that was. Table 3 the constructivist and positivist view of knowledge-making in academia. Constructivist positivist represents the belief that reality is dependent on the social context. Represents the belief that there are objective, generalizable, universal. Ivanic, 1988 p. 309 truths that exist independently of context and individuals that knowledge is created by and inseparable from the individual that knowledge is subjective. R.Tang, S. John/English for SI purposes 1989 S23 plus or minus S39 S33. Set for them. The assignment called for students to evaluate a quotation using course material to which they had access. Apart from reading, students were not required to engage in other activities that might be necessary with a larger scale research project, such as collection of data, interviewing of subjects, and so on. Our survey of academic literature reveals that this role is prevalent when the writer has conducted an experiment or study of some sort and wishes to detail the various steps undertaken during the course of research. This element was absent in the task assigned to the students in this study. The question that we cannot answer is whether or not our students would have exhibited this role of recounter if this element had not been absent, and would they have then fronted this role explicitly with the heirs person, or realized it in some other way. 5.5. Opinion holder and originator. We discuss these two roles together because we have noted that there is often a natural progression from the role of opinion holder expressing an opinion of someone else's views to the role of originator venturing one's own take on an issue in mature academic writing. In our sample, we found that students do use the heirs person to front both these roles, though in relatively small numbers. Out of 92 instances of the heirs person, only 49% fall into the opinion holder category, and 61% into the original category. This low occurrence could stem from the fact that these are fairly demanding roles, requiring writers to be accountable for the propositions raised. Using the heirs person pronoun for these roles is arguably even more daunting, as it means explicitly bringing the writer as thinker into the writing, exposing their thoughts to the scrutiny of the reader. Parrots 1993 p. 380 notes that, normally, my students read texts as though they were instructive collections of authoritative information. Small wonder, then, that they also tend to think of published writers as authorities who know it all, and of their own academic writing as little more than a report of what such authoritative others already know. For students to originate their own ideas and opinions might appear to them to involve aligning themselves with textbook writers and lecturers in terms of their right to be authors. It means exposing their original views to such authoritative others as their tutors and lecturers for evaluation. This is understandably an intimidating process, and it is possible that students feel insecure about the validity of their claims, seeing themselves to be at one of the lowest rungs of the academic ladder. Given that the heirs person is used so infrequently in conjunction with the roles of opinion holder and originator, a useful area for future research would be how our students realize these roles in other ways. As Kirsch 1993 p. 64 says, R.Tang, S. John/English for SI purposes 1989 S23 plus or minus S39 S34. Creating a distance from one's text denying ownership is one mechanism for coping with inhibiting audiences. It is possible, therefore, that the picture is not as bleak as it appears, and that students do actually venture opinions and originate ideas, hiding behind a cloak of passivization and seeming objectivity instead of overtly signaling their presence with the heirs person CF. Architect role endings. In addition, we feel it is important to recognize that it is the student's perception of their right and ability to be originators that is crucial. For example, we at times seen that students create certain positive expectations in their readers by signaling their intention to prove or examine a proposition. These are verbs with a strong element of mental cognition in them, and readers will understandably be disappointed if the students then fail to fulfill those expectations by merely presenting material, with no attempt at evaluation or argumentation. Where some might view this entirely negatively, we suggest that there might be a positive angle to this occurrence. Although certainly not ideal, it suggests that students see themselves in this powerful position, and their perception of their right to inhabit this role could be a step to fully and legitimately following through with the role they have introduced. 6. Concluding remarks and pedagogical implications. We have explored the different kinds of identities that students can bring into their writing when they use the heirs person pronoun. In addition, we have highlighted some of the difficulties students face when they enter the academic discourse community of the university. In this enal section, we make use of the insights introduced in this article to offer some perspectives on writing education in the university classroom. Our study has shown the wide-ranging nature of the identities that the heirs person pronoun confront. Taking care not to veer into a new kind of prescriptivism, we suggest that it is vital for students and teachers alike to be aware of the very real presence of these different ways in which the heirs person pronoun can be used in academic writing. For students, an understanding of the choices available to them may help them decide how best to present themselves in their writing. At present, some students may be avoiding the use of the heirs person simply because of some vague preconceived notion that academic writing should be distant and impersonal. For teachers, the results of this study imply the need to recognize that the question is not simply whether or not the heirs person pronoun should be allowed or encouraged in academic writing. Rather, the issue becomes which specific type of the heirs person pronoun, if any, writers should use when and for what purpose. This may also involve recognizing that the writer in a text is seen less in the presence versus the absence of heirs person pronouns per se than in the presence of certain types of heirs person pronouns. We believe that any writing education program at the university should include issues of writer identity and draw the attention of students to the fact. R.Tang, S. John/English for SI purposes 1989 S23 plus or minus S39 S35. That their language choices reopt who they are in their writing. This focus on critical language awareness seeks to empower students such that they are no longer naively manipulated by Clark, 1992 p. 118, thus paving the way for their emancipation when students as the power gained through awareness to act. Clark, 1992 p. 119. This conversion of what could be at present subconscious choices into conscious, well-informed decisions in their writing is an step to creating competent writers with a good sense of themselves. The responsibility of making these options known to the students lies with the active writing education programs that encourage students to be critical thinkers and writers, people who are able and eager to create the meaning that they want to create and the self that they want to present in their writing. Acknowledgements. We would like to thank Associate Professor Desmond Allison, Dr. Sunita Abraham, and Dr. Cecilia Varghese of the National University of Singapore for their valuable feedback and helpful comments throughout the course of our research and writing of this article, and our 1,102 students for agreeing to be part of the study. Appendix A11. More examples for each category from student scripts and published academic articles. I as the representative. The differentiation of British and American English causes us to ponder about the right form of standard English script 2. In the ecclesiastical sphere, we have words like abbot, bishop, martyr, psalter, and so forth. Script 13. We know that all dialects of English, whether standard or non-standard, are capable of conveying complex thought. Bissell, 1982. I as the guide. As we examine the various classes of loan words from French, we can see the different ways French civilization and culture has announced English script 12. In example 1, we see the tendency for SE to form interrogative constructions without changing the position of the subject you and auxiliary items with script 26. So far we have said nothing about the senses of words mentioned in point 4 of the proposal. Gradall, Leith and Swan, 1986. I as the architect. I will concentrate on the period Renaissance and its announcements on the English language script 6. R.Tang S. John/English for specific purposes 1999 S23 plus or minus S39 S36. In my essay, I shall look into the contributions made by the different languages to the lexis of the English language script 17. In the next 4 sections of the paper, I only explain what I mean by each of these issues in more detail, giving examples from the experience of my 9 co-researchers. Ivanic, 1985. I as the recounter of the research process. All of the papers I read were built around one of 3 commonplaces. 1. Creativity is self-expression. 2. Creativity is doing something new or unique. And 3. Creativity is using old things in new ways. Bartholomew, 1985. I tape recorded a conversation with each co-researcher about the role of literacy in their lives, past and present. Ivanic, 1998. Although I discuss only 3 students in this essay, my information about them is drawn from a 2-year period when I interviewed 8 seniors for each a year on a weekly basis. Chase, 1988. I as the opinion holder. Looking back at Khushwant Singh's words, we can determine from this period that English did indeed absorb the language as it came into contact with script 2. Secondly, I would like to show that, contrary to what Khushwant believes, the development of English is not merely because it is part of an upward evolution. That would be an oversimplification. Rather, the development of English is better evaluated as a history of changes. Script 27. I agree with Fairclough, 1992, that cross-disciplinary theory and research on the way in which discourse functions in society needs more sophisticated linguistic and intertextual analysis to show more precisely how discourse constructs identity. Ivanic, 1998. I as the originator. Hence, I will examine the factors contributing to the rise of and continued dominance and variety in the modern world, with the understanding that the meaning of Khushwant Singh's description can only be fully appreciated within these parameters. 3. Script 4. To me, the phrase embodies the whole evolution process of the language to its present-day status. Script 8. Part of the impetus here is, as I see it, to place writing in a larger context, and one where more than one heirs person pronoun occurs within a single example. The pronoun relevant to the role is the one underlined. 2. This italicized portion help us decide that the writer is inhabiting the role of the opinion holder, although the rest of the sentence and the subsequent 2 sentences indicate that there are elements of the originator identity present as well. 3. Although there are hints of the architect role in this example, we feel the italicized portion tips the balance in favor of the originator identity. R.Tang S. John/English for specific purposes 1999 S23 plus or minus S39 S37. To highlight it as a social activity. Chase, 1988. My idea rested on the assumption that at each of these stages students face different problems and that their successes in solving these problems need to be measured separately if they are to develop as writers. Lynch, 1982. References: Bartholomew D. 1985. Inventing the University. In M. Rose, when a writer can't write, studies and writer's block and other composing process problem.